stay in power for very long. And then we find that there's the Persian Empire. And I have a picture here of lions because it was actually during the Persian Empire, after the fall of the Babylonian Empire, and that's around 539 BC, during one specific king's reign, it would be King Darius, that Daniel found himself in the lion's den because he refused to follow the ways of the Persian Empire. He was committed to the ways of God. He was not going to compromise on his faith, even in exile. And then we find after 70 years of being in exile between the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Medes, and the Persians, we find that Israel, after 70 long years, they're able to leave this foreign land of exile, and they're able to go back to the promised land. And we read about this in Ezra. We read about it in Nehemiah. And they were permitted to return. Now, Ezra was a priest-like person, so he was all about understanding God's word and how that was lived out faithfully. And so he was tasked with restoring worship in Israel, rebuilding the temple. He was overseeing that. And then Nehemiah had a very different calling. He actually was a cupbearer in Artaxerxes' court. He was one of the most trusted men in that empire. And we find that Nehemiah had a burning desire to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And he's sent there as a governor to help rebuild the walls. And this is an amazing period of restoration, this return from exile back to the promised land. And then we find ourselves in lesson 30. And lesson 30 is all about the Persian Gulf. This beautiful body of water, which is along the coast, and the water itself is home to some amazing creatures. This was also a significant waterway from the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Persian Gulf emptied into the Arabian Sea. And this was a way for people to travel. It was also a way for commerce, for ships to go from one place to the next. And this was a significant resource for the people of that area. So what we see here is mangrove trees, and these are absolutely beautiful. We see this rock, it's called the octopus rock, and it's there in the water, and some of the natural creatures. There's narwhals and porpoises. There's all sorts of beautiful creatures that live in this water. So now that we've done a very brief, quick overview of the area of these great, magnificent empires, their rise and their fall, we're going to talk about the timeline. How does this all fit in with where everything happened along our time? We're going to see that if you open up to page 5 in your timeline book, in box 26, it's going to be found right below this image. I hope you can see that. Right below the image, it's the image of the Assyrian Lamassu. What you're going to write is on the screen, it's the Assyrians defeat the northern kingdom of Israel. And that's around 700 BC. So it's actually dated at 721, just so that you have a visual of when these things happened, the time frame. And then there's a second box there for 26, right down next to it, down into to the right. And in that box, you're going to write the Babylonians win the Battle of Carchemish. Okay, so those two boxes for lesson 26 on page 5. Then on the same page in box 27, which is just above the timeline, right next to that image, you're going to write there, Josiah restores the temple and recommits to the law. And that happens at about 622 BC. And remember, Josiah was only 16, a little bit older than you. That's significant. Because even though you're young, I want you to remember that God can still use you in powerful ways, just like he did with King Josiah. And then again on that page, just below the timeline, you're going to see another box for 27, and you're going to write in that box, Jewish captives are taken to Babylon. And that happens around 586 BC. And then for box 29, just above the timeline, right here, you're going to write Cyrus II conquers the Babylonian Empire. Cyrus II conquers the Babylonian Empire. So that completes our timeline. And I will also upload these maps because you're probably not going to see it very well, but I do want to make sure you have it and that you complete these. This first map, map 10, of the Persian Empire, it is a little bit more extensive in terms of coloring. So I want you to take your time in coloring that. But I'll make sure that you see what this looks like when I upload this onto our Homeschool Life website. And then you're going to do the next page, which is a little bit easier. And it's map number 11, which is the Persian Gulf region. And I will upload that one as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed reading about this. I know it was a lot of information in a very short period of time. But I also think that if we can understand some of the how cultures can rise in power and then fall and collapse, sometimes it's the natural consequences of our sin and our failure to follow God. And sometimes it's just because sin exists in the world. And so I just want you to be encouraged that when we follow God, even if we're young, God can do amazing things in us and through us, just like he did with King Josiah, even though the influences around him were people doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. So I just want to encourage you in this week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.